All right, welcoming our beloved Tami Brunk for our astrology of 2021 and whatever transmission wants to come through you today. Very excited to see
Right.
what wants to show up.
Thank you. I just first want to say, I lost my full screen again for some reason. I don't know what this is happening, but um, let's see. Because I want to be able to see everyone if that's possible.
Right, with the gallery view. You could always
Yeah,
sign back in.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, here I am. Yeah, no, I'm so, Lainey, I'm so excited to be here and so glad. And when I came on and saw the size of the group and the presence and felt it here, it's so nurturing to have this kind of intimate circle. I love it so much. This is what I think so many of us are really longing for, right? Is that depth of connection. So privileged and honored to see each of you here, and yeah. And Lainey, that I haven't read that since I wrote it. I'm sure we're all familiar with that feeling, right? Like if you've got a lot of fire in your chart and you're kind of a oracle, you channel stuff and then it's over and it's done and you forget about it. But wow, that was pretty good.
Love
Not
those.
that it was. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Okay, well, I'm really excited then to do this. And it's 103. Actually, that's the moment I was born. That's something that I always recommend to people to do, is to pay attention to the time of your birth and see when that shows up. It's always a really magical time. It's a good thing to take note of, to honor. So, okay, so wow, 2021. We are quite over the threshold of the year, and it is, wow. There is just so much that has been percolating for all of us in this, and I'm just going to kind of start with a zoom out of the big picture of where we're at, and then kind of narrow down into some of the energies and the flows and the tides that I see us moving into. But before that, I just wanted to start with a couple of the images that had come through for me, because I always have these strong images that kind of hold the year. And this year, part of what I've been seeing is that it's as if, over the last well, Pluto moved into Capricorn in 2008. So in terms of a larger window that we find ourselves in, Pluto moved into Capricorn 2008, and it moves out in 2024. And so there's this larger kind of holding space that we're in, where there's this very deep composting of culture at this time. And this is kind of a bigger framework to look at. Um, and so that's been very alive and present. What I've been referring to as it's the death birth of our culture, and the U.S. is really at the heart of where this is happening. And I've been seeing that we are each uh, death doulas and midwives of this culture that we're creating together. And so, okay, so Pluto moved into Capricorn in 2008, and then as we know, from 2017 until through 2020, then we had this lineup of South Node, Saturn, and Jupiter all moving through Capricorn as well. So we have been doing such powerful work in the realm of ancestral healing. It feels like we've been mucking around a lot. We've been doing some super heavy lifting. And so it's kind of like, if you can imagine, if you've ever heard of those ceremonies or rituals where people actually bury you to the neck up, right? And so you've got to do that work of just staying like this and just doing that kind of that deeper work of, this is what it feels like to be really constrained. 2020 kind of felt like that, right? It was just kind of like, here we're doing the deeper work just by being very, very still. 2021, it's kind of the feeling is almost, my feeling was almost like, imagine that, but you're actually under the earth in some sense, because in some ways we have been so connected to the earth and so deep diving that now we're kind of coming up for air. We're starting to come up, and it's like this big in breath, also a little bit like that baby beginning the birthing process. So this year is like beginning that in breath of this next phase that we're moving into, where the tide begins to turn more into the direction of birth rather than it being quite so deep into the throes of death. That doesn't mean by any means that we're, of course, out of the waters, as no one would tell you. I mean, not not in all seriousness, that 2021 is going to be a breeze. And if they do, don't listen to them because we all know better in our guts, right? But one of the things that blows my mind is the way that, I would imagine every one of you in this circle, just raise your hand. I might ask for a little bit of connection if you all want to do that. And if you want to just receive, that's fine too. But who felt November, December of 2019, who of you felt it coming? You don't have to be an astrologer to have felt the rumblings. Like, wow, didn't we all? We knew something big was coming. And so maybe we can begin to trust that those sensations in our gut and the ways that we're beginning to knit our psyches together in a healthy way, we're getting true um, recognition of what the energies are in the room, in the larger cosmos and here on Earth. And so, what were we feeling at the beginning of 2021? Wasn't it kind of it was somewhat of a combination. There's this elation at the grand conjunction when Jupiter and Saturn came together. There was this feeling of of relief, and again, like this, we're bringing in the oxygen. We're beginning to have more of that air element, and yeah, precognizant dreams. Awesome, awesome, Tiffany. Like a lot. I'm guessing there are many dreamers in this circle, and that's so important that we honor the dreamers and that we honor our dreams. Um, so so there's this um, feeling then of this movement into more of the breath of the air, and there's this excitement that came in at the winter solstice, which was much, much, much needed. We as a collective got to look at the sky and see these beautiful stars come together, these planets. And we could talk to our auntie who's a Christian and say that's the star of Bethlehem, or we could talk to our star sisters and say this is the beginning of the age of Aquarius, or however we wanted to say it. So it was a connector, something beautiful that we could all look at that connected us all beyond the lines of politics or differing beliefs. And that's the way that really, if you think about, that was really the beginning of this year. If you want to move deeper than the Gregorian calendar, that's when we started our year in more of the old ways. So that was um, something that we began to feel. We also felt the tremors of even more of this experience of the shakeup of what it is that has the more profound dismantling process that continues to be underway. So, with Aquarius and with Uranus in the equation, and Uranus stationed direct on Thursday. So Uranus's energy is very much in the room as we're gathering. So when you have a lot of Uranus and a lot of Aquarius energy, it is going to be about waking up. It is going to be about accessing higher states of consciousness. It is going to be about awakening that light body and awakening the star seeds and all of that celestial kind of awareness. And at the same time, it is about it's about blowing up. It's about just really very dynamic. The word that keeps coming to mind is dynamic. It's kind of a gentle word for something we feel. There's the necessary eruption. There is the necessary shaking at the foundations that's continuing. And we often think with Uranus, when you go through a personal Uranus cycle, or as we are collectively going through now a Saturn square Uranus cycle this year, this is a time that it's about a shift of assemblage point. So it's about shifting our entire how we orient ourselves in the world. It's about a profound shift into another dimension, as it were. So something that's been happening from 2020 to 2021 more powerfully than ever before is that more and more and more of us are beginning to awaken to our multidimensional natures. And that this also is part of that Uranian, Aquarian gift to us. So there's something intriguing. Uranus is a very strange planet. It leans on its side. It's got a really interesting personality. It's got a very erratic orbit. Um, and and something that's very interesting to note about it is that even though it's like being hit by lightning in some ways, it's like that kind of, I often think of it as like it, it's like wherever we're asleep, wherever we're unconscious, Uranus is going to tap us there, and it's going to be this kind of this awakening experience, which sometimes is incredibly uncomfortable, and sometimes it's like thrilling. It's a thrill ride. Depending on if we are Uranian kinds of people, if we like change, we might find this year to be particularly exciting. If we're a lot of like earthy, kind of grounded, don't like change, well, you've made it this far, right? But there's a lot of that fast moving energy. But the paradox of Uranus is that even though it is very much about change, it's very much very dynamic. It's very much about like the terremoto, or the the um, the earthquake energy that shifts everything so that it comes into right place. It also, if you tune into it at the right frequency, even though there appears to be so much disruption on the surface, when you really sink down into it and you connect to the frequency of Uranus, this is also true for Aquarius, by the way, we find what I've been feeling very deeply to be this current. It's a river current or an electrical current beneath all the chaos that is filled with peace. Uranus actually and Aquarius create spaciousness. And it's kind of like, when we drop into stillness, when we drop into certain meditative states, it's like everything stops. It's that still point. And that's where I'm going to invite all of us to drop down into as frequently as we can, so that we can really tune into that frequency beneath everything that's happening on the surface and align ourselves with that. So that is always available and present for us. And I don't know if you all have noticed this, but I know for myself, if I am on screens too much, if I'm really looking at what's happening in the news, social media too much, I get way up here. I'm totally dissociative, and it's highly uncomfortable. The image I got the other day when I had decided to actually, it was last week, and I decided to specifically engage with what was happening in the news more, because I had felt so out of it that I was just like, okay, I want to be part of this human collective. So I am willing to connect to some level. I spent 2 days doing more of that. And I'm telling you, it felt like that image of a dog who's got like some animal or some toy in its mouth, and it's just shaking it back and forth. That's how my mind felt. That was how my psyche felt, was just this ragdoll, right? Just like absolutely, just shake that out. So I was just like, ah. But what happened too that I recognized simultaneous to that was, what I've been recognizing is that even though and I think many of us have had these very extreme one day to the next, one day can be really good, feel really connected. The next day can feel like pins and needles, like somebody's scraping your eyes out. Like I know that's how I feel sometimes. Um, that on those, even on those days, when we can just really just sit, and to be honest, I've been finding that it's actually not doing anything is what's working for me. Like I'll just sit on the couch and I'll just, no agenda. I don't meditate, I'm not chanting, I'm not listening to something online. I'm just sitting on the couch. I'm just breathing. I'm just being there. And I don't close my eyes either. This is part of what's happening. I just let whatever wants to come. It's an unwinding. And it strikes me that that's such a radical thing to do, to not do anything at all. And when we do that, right, it's so funny. We're like, it's like that whole thing about how kids now are their moms, well, until 2020, they were getting run around to every event after school, and they had no free time. Like every moment is packed. Something about that, like leaving no room for just dawdling. The inner children that we have inside of us need dawdling time. And so I've been finding when I go into that place that it's just very quick. There's like this whoosh, there's like this experience. Yeah, bringing in the sacred play, yay. There's this, there's just a wealth. It feels like a wealth, an abundance, a tremendous richness of spaciousness that envelops us. And I actually do like to credit that to how many of us are gathering now in circle and how many of us are gathering in global meditation and are gathering to raise the vibration around the planet. So, but sometimes you got to stop long enough to actually feel those currents coming at you so you can receive them and get real, just do nothing. Just do nothing. It's a radical practice. Um, and I think I recently was listening to Joseph Chilton Pierce. He's a Zen monk, and he's written. I don't think he's had a lot of stuff out recently. He's an older gentleman, but just a wise one. And he wrote The Cosmic Egg and something books about children and play. And he's wonderful. But I was listening to him, and he said, there's a study that came out. I think it was in the 70s. They took this broad this group of young children, and they looked at the children who were the happiest. Yeah, uh-huh. I'll write that. The children who were the happiest, just like by all measures, like they were just really joyful kids. And they looked at what these children had in common, and this blew my mind. He said what they had in common was each of these children spent a significant amount of their time just like gazing off into space, just not doing anything, just zoning out. How many of us did that when we were kids? And what do they say to us about that? Like, stop daydreaming, like do something already. But it's kind of a tragedy because we really like have to learn, that's where that's the fertile void. That's that space where we just get to be. So, I'm going to invite all of us to, that's cute, Tiffany. Okay, Joseph Chilton Pierce. I'm writing it there. He's great. He's wonderful. One of these gems you listen to. There are some people who are just so rich and deep, like an old, like a redwood, like an old ancient tree. Not that he's even that old, but he's like that. And listen to Joseph Campbell. He's like that. Listen to Marion Woodman. She's like that. Some of these people who kind of, I don't know how to describe it even, but we really need our elders now. So anyway, he's one of those. Mark Nepo, yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's one of the things about 2021 to consider is to really drop into that. So I um want to, and Rumi, yeah, beautiful. So this is one of the features of this year is we're getting a big inflow of air. And the reason I say that is because of course we had Jupiter and Saturn conjunct at the winter solstice in Aquarius, 0 Aquarius, beginning a 200-year air cycle where from this point forward, they come together about every 20 years. And they will come together primarily in the air signs. So that's part of why I would say that. Also, even, in February, we're going to see 6 planets and 1 asteroid at the February 11th new moon, all in Aquarius. So we've got all this Aquarian energy all throughout the year with Saturn and Jupiter in the sign, but especially this part of it, that it continues. And then also we've got a Mercury air year. So Mercury stations retrograde 3 times a year. And that is a lot of air, is it not? It's a ton. So Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde in the sign of air 3 times this year. So that's the realm of the mind, of our consciousness. It's also opening us up to more of that spaciousness, more of that air. And it's going to be rough on you. Well, maybe it could think about oxygenating water. Think about that. Ozone, ozone with water. That could be a good thing, right? Add more air to the water. Think about fire, fanning the flames. You better just watch it, Lainey. Yeah. Well, will it be helpful for you? I think you could just say you're in the front lines, you're doing some of that. So, okay. I'm going to take the questions at the end, maybe some of them. Well, I'm going to stay kind of focused, but yeah, okay. Okay, those are awesome. All right, so not only that, We also have the North Node in Aquarius. I'm sorry, in Gemini. So North Node is the head of the dragon. North Node is true North. It is collectively how it is that we are realigning with our collective soul purpose, right? So that's, and so North Node in Gemini, and also Venus is in a Gemini cycle. So, wow. I mean, that is a lot of air. And so let's talk about air. What is air about? You know, air is an element that is connected to, if you think about wind, if you think about tornadoes, if you think about, this very dynamic, it's fast moving, it can move in any direction. It is a cleansing element. It helps us cleanse and purify. If you follow Asian medicine, Chinese, Vedic, wind is often given kind of a bad rap, because it's kind of intense. When it's a super windy day, there are some cultures where they'll say, don't go outside at all. Now, I don't necessarily personally subscribe to that. I think that I love, yesterday it was windy and cold and snowy here, and I walked outside and it was just like, okay, we work with the elements consciously and say, okay, please cleanse me, like really help me to move for my system what's not working well. So we can work with air, and we can invite air to let us change, invite air to cleanse us. Air is also, it's a foundation, one of the primary foundations of life. We can live without food. I think that they've found for about a month. We can live without water. I don't remember how long, but it's not, maybe somebody here knows, but it's not super long. Air, how long can we live without air? Not very long at all. So it is the number one building block for our earth, for our kind of life, our life form. We need air to survive. And so if you think of oxygen, you think about how oxygen in our bodies helps us to um, be more alive. It helps us to be healthy and to be oxidative. Think about oxidizing agents. Then, think that's also where it's just this refreshing, inflowing energy to help us feel more rejuvenated. So that's part of what we can think about with that air element that's moving through. And so I mean, obviously, there's also, when we talk about 2021, it's not just, and we have to look back at 2020 and think about how so much was happening in the realms of these systems of oppression, of white supremacy, that people were beginning to wake up to, who had not really seen it before. People who had not really recognized it before are beginning to see that. And as I speak now, I'm going to move more again into that Pluto and Capricorn dimension, which is still active. It's still at play. It's still very much under the surface. It's that, and we need to honor that. We're continuing to see brought to the surface what it is that we have not collectively wished to see, in terms of um, the profound pain that's been buried for so long. Now with this oxygen, the way I've been seeing this is that it has to do with, okay, the difference between, if you've ever worked with compost, or even been in a swamp versus soil that's really healthy and loamy. When you're in a swamp, I'm not going to say there's anything wrong with a swamp. It's a beautiful environment, but most of us don't live there, right? It's anaerobic. There's and if you have compost that's not healthy, there's not enough oxygen getting in there. So when, on the other hand, you've got soil that has the right kinds of elements so that it holds oxygen in the soil, then things can break down more quickly. So that's also part of how I'm going to invite us to see things this year, is we still have that Capricorn element, thank goodness, because we still have a lot to compost, but we're being aided in composting it more rapidly, which might mean more unrest, which might mean more chaos on the surface. But again, this is what's needed. There's so much that does need to change the fundamental root level, that we can bless that change that's needed. And when we start to see the unrest and all of that around us, just to begin to bless it, to say thank you for the change. Thank you for the shifting. Thank you for the upheaval. Thank you for the dismantling. We need this. We need this because Among other things, I think this age we live in, which you could say is a 26,000 year, a shifting of a 26,000 year cycle, or a turn of the great wheel, which has to do with the sun at the galactic poles at the winter and summer solstices. This is at least a 13,000 year cycle, if not 26,000 year cycle we're in the midst of, like massive change. Um, when you look at it from that perspective, we can know that this time we're in is a time where we are simultaneously being I am not the first one to say this by any means, but we see and feel all the kickback from kind of like the ego death. When we each go through an ego death, it's the same thing here in the world around us, where there's a ton of, a lot of energies that are saying, no, I don't want to be, I don't want to be dismantled. It's like the immune system of this dying being, which is our patriarchal culture, is trying to fight off and fend off all these changes. And on the other hand, there's this these new emergent structures and ideas and concepts and systems that are coming to the surface that need oxygen. They need the support. They need the healthy compost to be able to come into new form. So, oh gosh, sometimes there's just so much more. And Lainey, how much time do I have? Do I have another 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
A couple more minutes.
Okay. So until 1:30?
Yeah, ish.
Okay.
You can do
Okay.
1:35. It's fine.
Okay, cool.
Because if people have
So,
questions, if you wanted to do that, whatever feels good,
okay, great. Perfect.
we can be in the
So,
flow.
um, what else? So I like to focus, since this is half an hour and there's so much to talk about. Um, hmm, I like to focus on Jupiter and the North Node and Venus, just to be simple, because we all know that the rising of the feminine is part of what is healthy for us to focus on right now, because it's rebalancing our world. So this is why, and this is also one of my areas of specialty. And so I deeply track the cycles of Venus, and every new Venus cycle, my collaborator and I, Kaylin Castell, we take people through, usually about 100, mostly women, but some men, through the entire Venus cycle as an initiation, through the lens of the Inanna descent story, which was literally a description of the Venus cycle. So the current Venus cycle that we're in, and this began in June of last year, and it completes in January of 2022, is a Gemini cycle. And so that suggests for us the medicine or the energy of the feminine that we can work with productively to help us really move through this coming year. So Gemini suggests that it is time for us to learn how to play. And again, I think start with those times of just dawdling, just doing whatever you want, just saying, what do I really feel like doing today? That's Gemini. Gemini is a free electron. It's the part of ourselves that lets us just do as we feel moved, as spirit guides us. Because we're needing to learn to get in touch with a lighter part of ourselves that that can tap into new creative solutions that we wouldn't otherwise tap into. So it's creative play. It's more of the collective that we've been hearing so much about with both Aquarius and Gemini. It's very much about, how can I remember how to play myself and just do nothing and just let whatever arises arise and respond to that. And then how can I also do that with others? So how can I co-create? Who are my playmates this year? Like, who do I want to play with? Like, literally ask that question, right, Lainey? Thank you. So those are some good questions. And then also, it is time for the feminine to find her voice. It's time for the feminine to speak. It's also part of what Gemini does, is creates networks of support. And also, she is the voice of the goddess, the creative muse, who's helping us to tell a new world story. So 2020, when Venus was was morning star until February 14th of this year, when she disappears into the beams of the sun, that's the period where she's dismantling, letting go of the old story. From May 5th through January 2022 is when she's rising in the evening star and she's building and telling the new world story. I say she meaning we. We're here telling, seeking and telling a new world story. So that's part of what we're invited to do this year is to really engage the medicine of Gemini. The North Node's in Gemini as well. So again, that's true North for the collective. And then if you look at Jupiter, it's in Aquarius. So again, it's to learn, be a student of the element of air, be a student of the that force of life that truly animates uh, that animates us. Be grateful for the breath, and also I would just say in completing that a big piece of what we are remembering now, and this is what I was going to get to with Pluto and Capricorn, is we've lived in this age of separation, and we are being conditioned even more deeply now to separate from each other based on our perceived belief systems, based on actually very superficial parameters, based on whatever those constructs are that they put out to say, oh, believe in this or believe in this, and then divide. It's been an age of separation. And so where we're at now is reconnecting with one another. And part of what's so incredibly important about that is for us to find ways to hear the voices and connect with people whose experiences in life are quite different from our own. And this means, when I looked at, for example, why so many people voted for a particular president in this country, a big piece of that is because in this country we continue to be quite segregated according to class. It's quite stunning. And so class and race, and so a lot of what I think we're going to be seeing over the coming year and years are all these really creative ways that through technology we're beginning to break down the barriers between ourselves and our brothers and sisters who are of different life experience and different rich perspective. So I think I'm going to complete with that. Sacred playdates every month. Yay, Venus and Gemini. Awesome. Okay, so that's it for me. Thanks, Lainey.
Does anyone have any burning questions for Tami? Are you willing to answer like a couple of burning questions?
Sure, of course.
All right, let's see if there's any burning questions. And of course, you're welcome to stay and join us for Koya. We're going to be moving into movement to embody all of this juicy information and all of that is flowing.
I'm definitely going to do Koya.
Oh, yay.
I'm excited.
So let's see if anyone has any questions. Oh, Krista, I see you raising your hand.
Just a tiny question, Tami. One of the things you said, sort of like guidance going forward, was to be a student of the air element. And that's my area where I do a lot of work, is in helping people cultivate intimate relationships with nature elements. So I have suggestions for, I'm thinking breath work is one way to get in touch with the air element. And if there are others that come to mind, when you said that, like just studying the air element, wind, feeling the wind, feeling the breeze, but are there any others that come to you that you would suggest that we could pay attention to?
Yeah, thanks for helping. Thanks for asking that specific question. I would say absolutely to cultivate a practice of actually noticing the sensation of air on our bodies and when we go outside and how that shifts and changes, because air is one of those things, and wind, and that we cannot pay attention to, that's so vital. I think literally oxygenating our water, and any of those kind of, if we have access to those kinds of tools where we can really bring in more, and as you said, breath work is incredibly important. Working out in such a way that we do get enough of those deep in breaths. But part of what you're saying, and I didn't have other specific practices, but I think that there's so many tools out there. But what I appreciate so much about what you're saying, Krista, and I love to follow up with you at some point about this too, if you ever wanted to, is Gemini and Aquarius. That is something that these two signs have in common, is that they're very much, when we're working with those elements, it is as if the nature spirits are very much alive, very much activated. And so I would really say for anyone who works with those energies this year, please make offerings to the world around you, because we need to remember how to work with these energies. They're incredibly important, incredibly important. So thank you for doing that work. And I would love to know more. Yeah.
Okay, I'll reach out.
Okay, beautiful. All right, thank you.
Yay, love it.
I,
That's perfect time for your work, Krista. Karen Elizabeth, I see you.
I have a burning question because air, like air moons, I am like, I'm out there. I'm so scattered. My question was going to be, how can, when we're in such air, how can we not let it like make us go explosive, or, you know, how can we use it beneficially?
Yeah.
And grounding isn't necessarily one of those, but because, and that's the highest percentage in my chart too. So even though I have a lot of fire, but so yes, please.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. And I think it's a little bit of a riddle, because on the one hand, I do think it's beautiful that Pluto is still in Capricorn. So I see that as a profound gift, that quieter composting that's happening. We can root in to Pluto and Capricorn. We have Uranus and Taurus. And I actually see that as also this waking up to the expansiveness within the body, within the earth. You know, our world is very paradoxical. And Gemini is going to wake us up to that, you know, the upside down nature of everything. But I think it goes back to what I mentioned before around that current or that still point we can access when we're working with the element of air, and particularly Aquarius. I would invite you to consider, kind of turn your mind upside down or inside out and say, actually, how is it that because I'm an air sign, I have more access to that ground of being, which can be um, quite help us navigate with flow. You know, again, like consider that, and consider air currents when you study air. I meant that quite literally, to study air. I mean, study the way air works as a scientist would, as well as studying with all the many resources we can. What do they say in Wiccan tradition or native tradition? What is air about? But I want to encourage you to consider that when we drop into the element of air and into the breath, then that's where we find this really potent grounding.
Okay.
So earth is one way we do that, but also air has an element of centering and grounding to it as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll need to really explore that, because I know I'm going to be, if I let it go.
Again, just experiment with slowing down, not doing anything, and letting yourself drop into like this great river of consciousness that will take you where you need to go. Because the thing is I think when we talk about grounding, we think I'm going to root in this place and then I'm going to stay there and it's going to be steady. Well, that's not the time we live in.
Right.
It's just not. So instead, it's like I get to being adaptable, being air is actually what works right now. I would encourage you to say, this is your time. And I do also say, when I begin a practice, I'll say, bring any tendrils of consciousness or awareness down and into my body now. You know, bring it down and in now. Do practices where you feel yourself move down in. That can help too.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And I will say, I'll say too that I know this isn't heavy on the astrology, and I actually am going to be doing, and I'll send you a Zoom link to send out with the recording and a date. I think it's going to be Saturday. I'm going to do a much longer kind of program. So I'll let you know what that is.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. And of course, we're going to include all your information. I'd highly recommend Tami and her readings and just all that she does, and her star readings, especially if you want to know what stars were in the sky and their influences at the time of your birth. It's very unique, which most other astrologers don't do. So really love you, and just so grateful for your presence and coming and beaming in and sharing your wisdom and offering us so much juiciness that we're definitely going to explore in the inner circle this year too, and really bringing in these practices. So thank you.
Thank you, Lainey. I so am appreciative of you holding space as you do. I'm so lucky to be here.
Yay. All right, beloved. So we're going to take a little break here. And yes, share any love with Tami in the comments. Love her up. And we're going to take about a 5-minute break. And we're going to be moving into Koya. And so I recommend just kind of going off screen so that you're not constantly on screen the whole day. We're going to have these little moments and use the bathroom, get any liquids that you need, get anything. We're going to start after we do our intro and everything, laying down on the floor. So if you want to set up a mat, whatever feels good to you, just begin to get yourself prepared for moving into Koya. And we will come back on in about 5 minutes, and we will see you then.